I will call to order this meeting of the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board for Wednesday, September 21st, 2022. This meeting is being held both via Zoom and with several members in person in Sacramento. We'll begin the meeting with item 1 on our agenda, which is a roll call vote. The chair is present. Vice Chair Reeves.
Present.
Member Ang.
Present.
Member Allen.
Present.
Member Kent Monning.
Present.
Next, we'll move to approval of the minutes of our last meeting, that of August 17th, 2022. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, moved by Member Ang. We will take a roll call vote. The chair votes to approve. Vice Chair Reeves.
Aye.
Member Ang.
Aye.
Member Allen.
Aye.
And Member Ken Monning.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving now to item number 3 on our agenda, which is report from the chair. Have a few items today. First of all, as I do each month, I'd like to report that the board does most of its work, for those who are watching, between meetings. The meetings are relatively short, about an hour or so in length. But between meetings, board members put in many, many hours of work to hear cases, to review cases that have been appealed at the second level. And in the last month, the board has reviewed and made determinations on 1,202 cases. So very good work, board members, a lot of cases handled. At the same time, the field judges, and there are about 150 of them, the field judges have heard thousands and thousands of cases in the last month. So the office continues to work very hard and at great speed to try to minimize the backlog of cases stemming out of the pandemic and various closures of offices that left people unemployed or seeking unemployment. A couple other announcements. From October 17th to October 20th, there will be a meeting of the CUIAB Board of Governors. It will be my first in-person meeting as president-elect of the board. And I just want to ask my colleagues on the board if between now and then, or now, you have any items you'd like me to discuss, and same thing for staff with my colleagues at CUIAB to see how the other offices around the other 49 states are doing. I'm happy to bring those issues up. I'll also be coming back to you after that meeting with solicitation for agenda items for the National CUIAB Educational Conference, which will be in June. Tying to that a bit, on August 30th, Executive Director Kutry and I met with the Labor Secretary and the Undersecretary, State of California Labor Secretary, to discuss how our office has been doing. We have this meeting every quarter, and we're happy to report we are doing very well. When you compare us to national statistics, which we've gotten from CUIAB and from the Department of Labor, we're doing much better than average, and Director Kutry has talked about that from time to time. He may talk about it more today. But I'm happy to report the Labor Secretary and the Undersecretary are both happy with the work we've been doing as an organization, the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. Next announcement, I just want to thank Becky Bach for doing training for me on CAMS today. I have very little expertise in the area, but I know a lot more now than I knew at 10 o'clock this morning. So thank you, Becky, for that. And hopefully it will prepare me to be able to easily take on cases where there are disagreements between members who take the original case. Lastly, I've been asked to take a look at our December board meeting, which is now scheduled for December 21st. Now, that is right in the heart of the holiday season, and those who have children, it's during their breaks. So we've been asked to take a look at moving it from the 21st to the 14th, or possibly some other date. And if the 14th doesn't work, we will have administrative staff call around and find a date that does. But for now, I just want to pull that one date, the 14th of December. Does that work for board members and senior leadership staff for the December meeting? Is there any objection to that date? Anyone for whom it does not work?
I had received word that it was going to be on a different date, but the 14th does not work for me, Mr. Chair.
Does the 15th or the 7th? Well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't.
The 15th would work for me. And what was the second date?
Well, no, if the 15th works for you, why don't we all take a quick look at the 15th and see if that works for us? And if not, I will turn it over to our administrative staff. Really? Is there anybody for whom the 15th of December does not work for our December board meeting? Seeing no objection to the 15th, hearing no objection, we will tentatively set it for the 15th of December, and that will be confirmed by staff later this week or next week. But consider it now to be the 15th of December. Of course, we do have an October and November meeting before then, but we're looking ahead to the December meeting. And that concludes the chair's report. Now we move to item number 4 on our agenda, which are board member reports, beginning with my vice chair, Dan Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a formal report. However, I would like to thank you and congratulate you on your upcoming leadership role at the national level of UI boards throughout the country. And I think you're going to offer great leadership, and I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Dan. Moving, after that wonderful report, we'll move on now to a report from Mike Eng. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I have nothing for formal report, but I also want to say kudos to you. I know that you've been talking a lot about the national agenda and how that would affect us here. And so knowing that you're past having seen firsthand your leadership skills in the legislature, it's very appropriate that you take this leadership role, and I commend you for the road that we're about to embark on.
Well, thank you, Mike. Greatly appreciated. Moving to Member Allen.
I have no formal report other than to thank all levels of the organization for their good work during this pandemic. The last 2 years, really, we've been in this pandemic. And for Chair Block, maybe we can have a conversation offline, because I do have some suggestions about items that we talked about at the national level.
Good, I would appreciate that. Thank you, Michael. Moving on now to Member Kent Monning.
Well, thank you, Chair Block. Just to echo my colleagues, I think it's great that you are in this role and that you'll be able to convene in person. And I think that there will be a lot of benefit from having nationwide discussions about the important work that we do. So I look forward to learning more. And I do have some things that I could talk to you about as well that would be good questions to bring for the Board of Governors meeting in October.
Great, I appreciate that.
And I did have some specific recognitions, no formal report, but I just wanted to thank PJ Bach for training me on CAMS yesterday. She did a great training, and it's a lot to learn, but being able to see CAMS for me for the first time, I know that people have been working on this for a very long time at our agency now, and actually seeing it just made me realize how many thousands of decisions are being made to make this platform work for the public, for all levels of our agency, and it's really mind-blowing. So I really appreciate how much work has gone into it, both by the IT team and the subject matter experts, and it's very exciting. It does take time to get to learn it, but I think it will be a great tool in the future for us moving forward and for the public as well. So thanks to everyone involved in that, and thank you, PJ Bach, for your great training.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, item number 5 on our agenda is public comment. Do any members of the public wish to address the board?
Chair Block, I have no hands raised for public comment at this time.
Okay, we'll give them 30 seconds more if any member of the public wishes to address the board.
No hands passage at this time, Chair Block.
Okay, in that case, we move on to item number 6 in our agenda, which is a report by our Chief ALJ and Executive Director, Mike Kutry. Mike?
Thank you, Chair Block, and good afternoon, board members. I'd like to start by welcoming our colleague to my right, Presiding Judge Bach. She needs no introduction to anyone else here, but I thought it fit anyway. She just finished training her 12th cohort of judges since 2020. That makes, I think, 78 ALJs that she's brought on and onboarded very successfully. And then that was a matter of weeks ago, and now she's dug completely into her new role as presiding judge of appellate operations. With her guidance, I'm confident that she will help the board navigate both the increased caseload and the transition to CAMS in the coming year. So welcome. I'll give you an update about field office issues, workload, and timeliness. In August, the 30 and 45-day time lapse continues to report in the low single digits. Incoming monthly appeals remain high, a full 63% over our pre-pandemic monthly levels. We continually meet with the EDD, and they are tackling each subject of their deferred workload systematically, which is anticipated to continue to result in increased appeal levels through the end of the year. As a result of the heightened appeal levels, the field offices continue a singular focus on resolving the oldest cases first. We are making every effort we can to alleviate the long appeal wait times that the whole nation is experiencing now. Despite that effort, we closing almost 28,000 cases in August, which is a very high amount. Our case aging climbed from 101 days to 103.5 days in August. Much of that can be attributed to attrition, office closures, and missed time due to illness because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. I will note, however, that nationwide, the national case age average is 177 days in a continuously upward trend. So our plan going forward, importantly, one of our substantial bargaining units, Bargaining Unit 2, which consists mostly of the ALJs that hear our cases, reached contract terms with the state. That makes all 3 of our bargaining units under contract for at least the next year. One part of that bargaining in the last year was the reclassification of the ALJ position, which we've discussed recently. And in connection with that reclassification, we're about to embark on interviews for new ALJs for the first time in many months. We hope that they'll be onboarded and training in the 13th cohort and beyond in early fall. That will be led by San Diego's presiding judge, Katrina Morrison. And so she has a lot of materials and expertise to draw upon from Judge Bach, and we think she's in an excellent position as one of our longtime trainers to take that up with a group of new judges. Thankfully, COVID-19 impacts in the field were reduced in August. Mr. Silva will explain further shortly, but in the 35 days since the last meeting, we had 10 positive tests and 2 brief office closures. Nonetheless, we continue to miss production time from employees who are out with illness. But I think the landscape has dramatically changed in the last couple of months to the extent that the state has stopped testing employees who have not provided vaccination status to the state. So I'm hopeful that this fall brings with us a healthy and productive environment for our important mission to continue. CAMS is really our biggest field operations project right now. It is operating fully in Fresno and Oxnard and almost complete in Orange County. CAO Willoughby will be explaining the next system plans in a couple of minutes. I was fortunate enough to join the board member training yesterday provided by Judge Bach. It was very exciting to see CAMS in action at the appellate operations level. And I will be traveling to the Orange County office to train as a field ALJ next week and hear my first cases in the system. It has been a tremendous experience to have been part of the planning of the CAMS system starting in 2019, and now to hear my first cases in the next week. We've talked a lot about the subject matter experts who have just poured their decades of experience into the system over the last 3 years. But I've had a unique view just in the last 24 hours of seeing IT's back-end effort and how much work they put into solving the everyday problems that arise into making the user experience as excellent as possible. So I'd like to extend a special thank you to Jefferson and his team for their constant toiling behind the scenes to make that happen for us. I happily don't have any security incidents to report for the last month between meetings, and so that concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mike. Any questions or comments for Chief Judge Kutry, beginning with Vice Chair Reeves?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to reserve my questions regarding the CAMS role at the field level for Jefferson, but I do want to thank and congratulate you and Mark on completing the collective bargaining agreement with our ALJs, which is an enormous relief and a very important milestone in terms of tackling this workload that we are confronted with. And I want to, of course, thank the bargaining unit itself for their cooperation and collaboration and to finally put this to bed. So now we can move forward full force. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dan. Moving to Member Eng. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and kudos, of course, to everyone on CAMS, and excited to hear further reports as we go down the agenda. My only question has to do with the pandemic claims. As you know, the deadline for filing under PUA has ended, except for the 21-day notice where they've been denied a regular UI claim. I believe they have 21 days from that date of the denial, particularly our decision to file a like PUA. I wanted to know if we're tracking how many. I just have a two-part question. The first one is, are we tracking how many claimants are actually taking advantage of the late filing after we issue the UI denial? And number two, when do you see the day when the pandemic claims will no longer constitute a significant part of our caseload?
We confirmed with the Employment Development Department that ultimate adjudications of UI ineligibility where there would have been possible PUA eligibility are automatically being filed for that program still. So it's not something that the parties have to affirmatively declare. And so that, my understanding is that is still ongoing. That works nicely into your second question. We're down to 6% of our inventory being PUA appeals. So we're seeing a very remarkable transition out of the PUA realm coming from the Employment Development Department appeals section, which tells us that their adjudications on PUA issues are also tailing off.
I just want to, well, thank you. I wanted to, Mr. Chair, can I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
So with regard to that, well, as far as the pandemic claims, that's good to hear, but also it was very interesting and challenging, and I think we learned a lot from who was a completely new type of case with no precedent decisions, and I think that the entire team moved to catch up as those cases and the regulations came out. My question as far as the first one is, are you saying that notwithstanding any notice in our decisions, you're saying that EDD automatically reads our decisions and notifies the claimants that if they were denied for regular UI, they can file within 21 days?
Not exactly. So the way that the representation was made from the Employment Development Department was that if a claim has a benefit year in which PUA may have been granted, but for the UI eligibility question, and then we ultimately determine the UI eligibility question, they will automatically enroll the claimant in the second track, which is PUA. So that is a very defined window of cases for them, but my understanding is that it does not require an affirmative action on the part of the party. It's an automatic enrollment, much like they did early in the pandemic when they found someone to be ineligible for regular UI, they'd automatically enroll them in the PUA program.
Thank you for answering the question. I have nothing further, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen. Michael, we're not hearing you. Michael, I think you're on mute.
That's because I was trying to be good and I forgot. So Judge Kutry, it really is significant, and I'm very pleased to hear we reached agreement. Am I correct with all our bargaining units? Is that correct?
That's correct. All have active contracts now for at least the next year.
That's incredibly significant, and I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but my congratulations to the bargaining units and the management team, because as was already previously mentioned, that so much helps in terms of our work for the next number of years working through the pandemic. So I really appreciate that good news. And the only other thing I would add in terms of not so much a question, but a thank you, is that you're incredibly good about follow-up. I will call you regarding questions I have or concerns regarding particular cases or situations within the agency. And you're always so very good to return my calls and tell me exactly what's going on. And I also recently learned that Judge Kutry had me aware. I had a direct line to his briefcase, but I got upgraded to where I have now a direct line where he'll return my calls because it's not going to his briefcase. And I appreciate that. So thank you, Judge Kutry.
Thank you, Member Allen.
Thank you, Michael. Moving on to Member Ken Monning.
Thank you, Chair Block. I have one question that I don't know if it's most appropriate for Chief Kutry or PJ Bach, but just all the discussion about CAMs and then our case processing times, it just seems like someone could speak to how much more quickly we're able to process the cases in CAMs. That was something that stood out to me when I was looking at my first cases yesterday. So I don't know which one of you could maybe share a little bit about that.
I can talk about the FO side.
Okay.
And then I'll defer
Thank
to
you.
Judge Bach on the AO side. It is remarkably faster. From the mechanics of holding the hearing to accepting new documents from a party when it can be uploaded to the portal for portal users, to closing the decision. Now closing a decision is really hitting I'm going to summarize this, the final button, even though it's called different things for different people, and it disappears from the judge's view instead of having to be marshaled in paper from location to location to actually physically close it. It moves into a closing queue where staff can then access it immediately. So a much faster process than the decades-old paper process that we've been utilizing throughout.
Do you want to speak to AO?
Yes,
PJ
sure.
Bach? Thank you.
It's actually much faster in AO as well because, well, for several reasons, but the biggest one I've noticed so far is that when an appeal occurs, there is the marshaling of papers from a field office to appellate operations here in Sacramento, which now happens automatically via the computer system due to being paperless. So what sometimes could take, quite a few days to weeks now happens same day. And so that alone will help us move things along quicker for our agency and especially for the public, right? And then some of the processes, once it hits AO, are streamlined because it's already a paperless product there too. So again, that has expedited the whole process.
Well, thank you both. I just wanted to have the dots connected for all the hard work that's being done and the growing pains. This seems to be really wonderful to see how quickly we are able to move the cases along in CAM. So thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I just want to add to Vice Chair Reeves and Member Allen's comments about how good it is we've closed bargaining with all of our agents. And want to especially thank Mark Wusam, our Chief Counsel, and Kim Hickox, our Assistant Chief Counsel. Good work, you guys. And now I want to welcome to her new role our presiding judge for Appellate Operations, who's been around for a long time. You all know her, Becky Bach. Becky.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for being so welcoming. I appreciate that. So I will go over some of appellate operations numbers, and I'm actually very pleased to report that in appellate, there has been 36.3% of the cases closed within 50 days over the last month, moving our Department of Labor year up from 24 to 26% closed within 45 days rather. And we're headed on the right trajectory, which is really good news. We are still closing our cases within the 75-day requirement. We need to close 80% within 75 days, and we're at 95%, so that's still very positive. And our case aging actually dropped to 39.4, where the DOL, Department of Labor standard is 40 days, so that's also very positive.
Very good. Thank you, Becky.
Oh, and I wanted to also mention that we are, speaking of CAMs, we've been very active at the appellate level in processing all the second-level appeals that have come through Fresno and Oxnard, as they're 100% in CAMs now. And we have enjoyed having 3, now 4 board members trained in the CAMs system, and it seems to be going almost perfect. So it's going very well, I would say.
Okay, thank you, Becky. Any questions or comments for Presiding Judge Bach? Begin with Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions, but thank you for that report.
Thank you, Dan. Member Eng.
Yes, just a comment. Judge Bach, thank you for providing such detailed and scholarly responses to questions from the panel in the short time that you assumed the new position. They provided like real guidance to those few cases that don't often fit the usual fact patterns. And it's a pleasure to have been trained by you when I first joined, and to work even more closely with you in your new position. So kudos, and thank you, and much appreciation.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen.
Yes, Becky, hallmarks of a good teacher are patience and basically being a good listener when the questions are posed to the instructor. And I can only imagine the great job you do with all the cohorts, the new judges that come on. And Becky, I'm sorry to admit that I'm probably responsible for the almost perfect instead of perfect implementation of CAMS. But you quite patiently, and I thank you for everything you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Member Kent Monning.
Thank you, Chair Block. I asked my main question of you, but I just wanted to thank you specifically for, I had asked PJ Bach a substantive legal training question a few weeks ago, and when I came up yesterday for my CAMS training, she had folders of documents prepared for us to discuss my question and gave me all these training manuals and thoroughly responded to my question, which I am so appreciative of. So thank you very much, and for all the training and support that you provide the board members. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. Moving on now to item number 8 on our agenda, a report by our Chief Information Officer, Jeff Wilby, the father of CAMS.
Goodness. He is second cousin. I'm in there somewhere. Good afternoon, Chair Block, members of the board. After a long period of hot heat, I know I speak for several of us here in the Central Valley in welcoming autumn tomorrow. With the onset of cooler weather and pumpkin spice lattes, we do continue to make progress in our field office rollout of CAMS. And just to note, we have all made a seamless transition to using the acronym. It's no longer our appeals modernization, because the modernization has happened. So the CAMS that we're hearing is the Appeals Management System, and I almost did it. It almost got modernized again. But the appeals CAMS is our appeals management system. It is a large step forward, obviously, for us organizationally. Our field offices are being trained, as Executive Director Kutry mentioned. Orange County is rolling out this week and next, starting hearings with our ALJ staff. And we, within IT and within the subject matter expert community, we continue to work on fixes and enhancements, suggestions that we get from folks as they are exposed and start to learn the system. It will continue to grow over time. The support of our legacy systems continue to take up some of the cycles within IT, along with the fixes and growth that we're making in CAMS. We've been meeting with our peers in EDD to start to talk about what their roadmap looks like and how we can best make all of our individual systems talk together. And that, we've had very encouraging meetings with them thus far, and that is likely to ramp up as EDD gets more traction at that organization, and specifically within the appeals portion of that system. So in October, which is just a week or so away, we will be launching our training in San Jose. And then we will move towards the end of the year into San Diego and our inland field offices. Our staff continue to assess the equipment needs for staff. It's an interesting dynamic in terms of the number of screens that are most easily used in operating within the system, and then other things like email and so forth being available to you in multiple screens. And we are providing on-site assistance, obviously, as we do our office rollouts. The current 2023 schedule shows us completing all of the CAMS rollout by the end of June. Now, that's a perspective, but that's what we have laid out at this point. So our operation should, by the end of this fiscal year, be ready to roll, and we can start the retirement of our legacy systems. That will be good news. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments that you might have.
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Questions or comments for CIO Wilby, starting with Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Jefferson, for that report. Of course, I was one of the first, along with Mr. Allen, Board Member Allen, to tackle the CAM system, and I recognize it is a bit of a challenge straddling two systems at once, which we're asking our field operations to do, I would presume. So I had a question. I know that when Becky said almost, she might have been thinking about Mr. Allen, but she was looking at me. And that's because I'm just challenged, anything technology-wise. But I found it a bit challenging. But I also recognize that I'm walking into the system years into the making. And I would assume, since we are sort of the tail of this process, we're a small fraction of overall caseload that this body's processing every month, that it's largely designed and targeted towards those field operations. And I want to make certain I understand, because I have my own perspectives, but I understand and recognize that's different from the experiences in the field. So I was hoping maybe you could summarize for me kind of briefly what the feedback is that you've received thus far on the CAM system, and what tweaks you've had to make or plan to make as a result of that feedback as it gets rolled out. And then I'll ask my second question now, which is the speed of the rollout. Is it progressing along the time frame that you had hoped? Have you had to take some pauses? And so how does that calendar been adjusted as you've learned by actually working the system at the field?
Sure. Well, we are taking sort of dynamic feedback at this point in answer to your question specifically about how does the board member experience get there. Most of the feedback that we've gotten has obviously been from the field, because they have made most of the casework happen in their realm. That said, if we reel it back just 2 years, all of this was a flow chart on paper. And we were trying to both understand how the new system was capable, what it could do, and imagine ourselves in that space, because we were going from a very paper-oriented organization into something that was not going to be that way. So part of the state that we find ourselves in today is one where we're subject to our own limitations and what we could imagine. And then, of course, there are always fixes that we are going to come across. And I think have this week run across some suggestions that are going to help us moving forward. In terms of the rollout calendar, we've actually compressed that rollout calendar. There are some sort of gating criteria. We have a training staff that is working very hard to get to each one of the field offices, and I think that they've already made a pretty significant degree of compression for that calendar, which gives us effectively, though it straddles some months, about 1.5 offices per month. And a rollout of an office starts weeks and weeks before the actual hearings start. The cases are moved, if they're uncalendared, into CAMS. And then the staff training of scanning documents that may still be in paper form into the system happens. And then the calendaring happens for judges, which is weeks out. So that has its own sort of, you can just plunk several weeks right there into that as a process. And then, of course, the training has to happen in advance of each one of those actual actions taking place. So they've drawn in the end date, I think, significantly, maybe by 2.5 or 3 months from the original plan. And they're working a lot. So did that answer
Yeah,
all
so
of your
you-
questions?
So the timeline, the initial timeline has actually been accelerated
It has.
for its implementation. And I just want to acknowledge, first, how important this project is in terms of expediting this timeframe for the taxpayers who are applying for this, for these benefits. But then secondly, I want to thank the ALJs who are sort of, they're building a plane as we fly it. We're under enormous stress because of the caseload that we're operating with. And then trying to switch the system midstream is a challenge. So I want to both thank your staff for helping them make that transition, which is really important, but also recognizing the patience and the work that the ALJs themselves are putting in to make that transition successful. So thank you.
And you did ask another question, and that was what feedback have we gotten? It has been largely positive, in part because of the speed with which something can move through the system. And I will give kudos to the training staff in terms of helping to make it understandable what that process looks like, depending on your role, whether you are someone who's calendaring cases or hearing cases or doing the rest of the staff work that needs to get done. I'm hearing from ALJs who have been here for many, many years that they are very excited about it and that they like working in the new system.
Great to hear. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jefferson.
Thank you, Dan. Moving to Member Eng.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and as always, the Vice Chair has asked the very incisive questions, many of which I was going to ask, and you've answered them. And I look forward to the day when CAMS will be either that I can experience it by coming in or having it at a field office close to where I reside. I do want to commend you every experience that I've had with any department build out or build up or change involving new technology has run into massive cost overruns of 200 to 300%. And so I commend you to the extent that you're remaining, as the motto was said when I was involved in transportation, under budget and in budget and on time, if not faster. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Moving to Member Allen.
Yes, one part of the report that I was wondering about is you mentioned very politely the retiring of legacy systems. I just wondered your thoughts on that in terms of how do you do that when so much of the rest of state government is on state legacy systems and some result aren't we kind of interdependent upon those systems being able to communicate with one another? So I just wonder what your thoughts were.
So we do have communication with the Employment Development Department, but it is a data centric, I'll call it that way. So we can read those transmittal information electronically, and we'll continue to do that. We just do it with a different system. So even our legacy systems are ones that we own and built over the course of many, many years, and they have they have served us very well. That is really a bonus for us, because when we do retire that system, all of the data that sits inside it remains ours. It remains readable. So if there's a reporting requirement that we need further down the road, all of that information remains available to us in a format that we understand and can still take information out of. So we're lucky in that respect. But those systems are not what I would call so deeply intertwined with other legacy systems throughout the state that we can unwind them.
Thank you. That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Member Ketmonning.
Thank you, Chair Block. I do have a few questions. You mentioned launching CAMS at the San Jose office coming up in October. I'm just wondering, I know that there's weeks involved and ahead of time in the launch, but is it appropriate for a board member to come observe something happening during that time? Or is it all, so many weeks that there's not really I would be interested in observing or visiting to see how that looks. I just don't know what that looks like, so.
Sure, so there's staff training and the scanning of whatever paper needs to be scanned into the appropriate case. That happens very early, weeks typically, before the ALJ training happens. So depending on your druthers, you can go to either or both. I don't think that that's at all out of bounds. I'd leave that up to.
Okay, great, so we can be in communication, but I'm interested in kind of seeing how this ends up launching and being used at the field level as well.
I'm happy to send you the dates if you'd like to go to San Jose.
Thank you. And then you've mentioned a CAMS training team that it seems they've been traveling through the state. I don't know if you have it handy, but at some point I would love to know who's been on that team and who's doing all of this work for our agency. So if you don't mind sharing that, I'd be interested to know who those folks are.
I can reel them off, or I can send you an email.
Whatever you prefer. I don't want to put you on the spot,
Will I
but
get them all?
Will you get every one of them?
you could share that later if you want to make sure. I don't know how large the team is, but I would love to know who's doing this lift
I would
for
hate to
our
make
agency.
the error of
Yes.
omission in doing this.
So maybe you can share that later, because I would love to know. And then, since I was trained yesterday and I'm just starting on some cases, I did share some feedback with PJ Bach, and it's very exciting to be using software where we can start having conversations about, the board members are a very small percentage of who's using this, and we do things kind of in a different way than the field judges might do it. So is the best mechanism for us to communicate with PJ Bach, and she's, I know, keeping kind of a list of things, is that the preferred way for, okay, great.
We definitely see the list.
Great. Just wanted to make sure that you're aware of the list. Okay, wonderful.
And we do want your feedback. It's important, and you will have a voice in the creation of what other board members, in 10 years are going to experience. So it's an opportune time to look and give us your feedback.
Great. Thank you so much.
What other board members and Michael Allen will be experiencing in 10 years? Thank you, Laura. All right, we have item number 9 now, a report by Rob Silva, our Chief Administrative Services Officer. Rob?
Thank you, Chair Block. Good afternoon, board members. As Chief Kutry already mentioned, we were fortunate enough to have only 10 positive COVID cases reported over the last 5 weeks, which is down from previous months. I would like to update with regard to hiring. We have only had 5 support staff hires since the last board meeting. Of those 5, 2 are actually retired annuitants. So the upside with retired annuitants being that they have history with working in the CUIAB environment, they're essentially trained. The downside being they can work
960 hours per
fiscal year. We had a lot of, at the last board meeting, I reported a lot of support staff separations, retirements, and we've had 3 more since the last board meeting, including 1 retirement. So we're continuing just to be in constant hiring mode. We actually have 30 support staff hires currently pending. In fact, we have active support recruitments in almost every office within CUIAB, and that includes Office of Tax Petitions, Regional Support Unit, and actually 3 positions for appellate operations. The only office not currently engaged in recruiting for support staff is our Orange County Office of Appeals. Last week, we had 2 recruitments go live for supervising administrative law judge, one in our Bay Area Office of Appeals, one in San Jose. She briefly reported earlier that as of this Monday, there is no longer the COVID-19 testing protocol for employees that have not provided proof of vaccination. So we were engaged with that process for about 1 year, and that's no longer ongoing for folks. The supplemental paid sick leave program is scheduled to sunset at the end of this month on September 30th, but there is a bill to extend it to the end of the current calendar year. That's on the governor's desk to sign, so hopefully that gets signed and we can get a few more months of supplemental paid sick leave for folks that need it for COVID-19 purposes. After the last board meeting, the budget was adopted, so we've started a lot of purchasing. We have admin staff working on the large statewide copier replacement request for quote. I've been discussing with the procurement folks in IT, the new laptop purchases, the large ticket software purchases as well. We're engaging in some minor facility updates in Pasadena. We also have some Prison Industries Authority furniture installs that we're moving forward with. This coming weekend, we'll be finishing up a project in the Orange County Office of Appeals with the very last pieces of some modular installation that need to happen. And then the following weekend, off to Oakland, to the Bay Area Office of Appeals for more modular installs and reconfiguration there. And that is my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Turning for questions or comments, first to Vice Chair Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rob, for that report. I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Dan. Member Eng.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief Silva, I remember last board meeting, I had asked a question about the attrition rate, and I also want to report back to Member Allen, who had raised the same question. It turns out that on the chart that I was looking at, what I thought was the attrition rate was actually the retention rate. And it appears on that graph, the retention rates are close to 80 to 90%. And that's pretty commendable. And I also, just to comment, I know I work with other large employers and who are finding it very, very difficult to find staff at this time. So you must be doing something right because we're hiring new people and retaining them. So thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you, Mike. Member Allen.
Yes, Rob, just a couple of questions. Are COVID protocols still in place for the offices? Are we still following those?
Yes, we still have COVID protocols for, let's see, if someone becomes infected with COVID-19 who's been in the office within the previous 24 hours, we do still have to close the office for cleaning. All protocols are unchanged other than the testing requirement, which is now no longer needed.
Rob, the other question I had is that we talked earlier in this meeting about arriving at collective bargaining agreements with our bargaining units. With those agreements, are there any significant impacts on our budget that we recently adopted?
No, with the recently adopted budget, the only bargaining unit item that was outstanding at the time of last month's board meeting was what would be the 2022-23 pay increase for bargaining unit 2, our ALJs. And it was presumed to be a 2.5% increase, and that ends up what it became when the contract was ratified. So there would be no change to the current fiscal year budget based on that recent adoption of the bargaining unit contract.
Good presumption. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Member Kent Monning.
Thank you, Chair Block. No questions. Thank you for the detailed report, Chief Silva.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And with that, we have completed 9 items on our agenda. I have no closed session that I can see. I'll ask General Counsel Wusam if there is any.
There's none.
Nothing in closed session. In that case, we'll move to item number 10, which is adjournment. If there is nothing left for open session, I see nothing. We will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.